Today on Co-op for Two, Greg and I review the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We're going to have a lot of harsh things to say about this game, but before we do, I think it's probably important for us to talk about how hard it is to design and publish a game, and you should take our thoughts, with a grain of salt. These are our subjective thoughts. And also, before we start, we're going to do something unusual. Normally, we go down to the table and see how it plays. Greg is starting a new board game channel, especially concise reviews, yeah?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
And Greg is going to do the reviews for this game. Either you could go watch it on his channel, or maybe we'll cut it in now here.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a cooperative board game based on the 1974 famous horror film of the same name. Players will be working together to get the gas, keys, and get to the van before Leatherface can hang three of you on a meat hook. There's also a miniatures pack that you can buy to upgrade your game that at this moment is in pre-order, but you can purchase that separately and enhance your game. Over the course of the game, players will be moving around the board and revealing tokens as they enter spaces. These will be added to the hideous bag, changing the pool of available outcomes in the draw phase. Most of the game revolves around the draw phase. During this phase, players will be drawing tokens from the bag before deciding when to stop or being forced to stop by busting. You will be hoping to draw action tokens to use, but will risk drawing negative effects by drawing from the bag. Members of the Slaughter family will be added to the board to increase the danger to the players. Leatherface will be moving around the board pursuing the players, and if he catches you with enough damage, he will add you to the meat hook. After 3 characters are added to the meat hook, the players will lose the game. If they manage to get to the van with the gas and keys, and the hitchhiker is not in the van, those characters will score a victory based on how many of them survived. Players begin by picking a character, each of which has a special ability. Franklin, for instance, can look at the top 2 cards when he performs a search action. For an added challenge, players can add objective cards. You can draw up to 10 of these, split them as evenly as you can amongst the players, and they'll be representative of additional tasks to do, like meeting in specific areas of the board, drawing specific tokens from the board, or other little challenges that will just increase the amount of things you do and thereby the difficulty of the game. Players will all start in the van. Leatherface is the only member of the Slaughter family who starts on the board. He is placed in the killing room. Each round of the game will consist of 4 phases: movement, drawing, action, and cleanup. In the movement phase, players can move 0, 1, or 2 spaces. Each time a character enters a space from any effect, you will reveal any face-down token and add it to the tray. If it is the gas or keys, and you have room on your character sheet, you will add it to your board. Then on to the draw phase. This is the meat of the game, if you'll pardon the pun, in which case players will be adding tiles to this bag. Now, by adding tiles to the bag, you're changing the probability of what tiles you're going to be drawing out of the bag. So by adding good tiles in, you'll more likely have good outcomes. If you put bad tiles in, you're going to more likely have bad outcomes. You can choose not to draw from the bag. If you do draw from the bag, you will draw 1 tile at a time. When a tile is drawn, you will resolve its effect before drawing another. You are hoping to draw action tokens. Most other tiles have a negative effect when drawn. If you draw 3 matching non-action tokens, you are forced to stop drawing. Whether you are forced to stop or decide to stop, play proceeds to the action phase. If you choose not to draw, Leatherface will activate. More on that soon. Let's look at the various effects that the tiles produce when drawn from the bag. The bones have no effect, except of course when you draw 3 you bust and are forced to stop drawing. The eye will let you reveal another token from anywhere on the board, helping you search for the keys or gas, or to avoid other dangerous tiles. The photo allows you to look at the top card of the search deck and move it to the bottom. Action tokens are set aside for the action phase. Leatherface will move Leatherface towards the nearest character. If he enters a space with you, he will cause damage. The distance he travels and the amount of damage he does will depend on the lowest visible space on this track. The family token is added to the Slaughter family board. Let's take a closer look at the Slaughter family board. When you draw a family tile, you will place it face down so you remember if you drew it this turn, as it still counts towards you busting. When each of these tracks fills, you will add those enemies to the board. They each have their own effect, usually to damage characters. When you bust by drawing Leatherface tokens, you will add one of them to the board as well, and that will act as a clock over the game, increasing how fast Leatherface can move and how much damage he can do. And now to the action phase. If you didn't draw an action tile during the draw phase, then you'll skip this particular phase. If not, you can do one of the following actions. Move, which we discussed earlier. In addition to normal movement, you can also move through a window or door space. It is the same as normal movement, however, you can choose to take a wound and break the window or door permanently and pass through it for free. Pick up. This will allow you to pick up a face-up tile from your space, presumably a helpful tile to be added to the bag, or a winning tile like gas or keys. This is only really relevant for dropped items or items revealed by the eye tile. Search. On a namespace, you may draw the top card of the search deck, which feature random effects. Some are good, many are bad. Most will allow you to relive popular moments from the film. Push. You may push another character. If you push a friendly character, it can help uncover more tokens or move them to a safer space. If they are an enemy, you can push them away from you or into the road. Let's take a look at the road in more detail. The road acts as a barrier to Leatherface, but also, when using the search action, the truck will move one space down the road in a loop. If it hits a player character, you will take a wound. If it hits a Slaughter family member, they will die and permanently leave the game, except for Leatherface, who just moves back to the killing room. Your character can receive an unlimited amount of wounds. However, when you reach 3 wounds, 2 things will happen. Firstly, in the movement phase, you will no longer get a free movement. Secondly, if Leatherface enters your space and you have 3 or more wounds, he will take you and stick you on the meat hook. And remember, only 3 times can this happen before the game will end in defeat. And finally, the cleanup phase, where you'll take the revealed tokens from the tray and add them to the hideous bag. Now there are a few extra rules that I didn't go into about Leatherface getting enraged, cards to draw when you die, and ways to save yourself from the meat hook, but that's the bulk of the game. At the end of the game, if you win, you will score your victory as follows. There's also a solo mode, which features just a slight rules change, which is a little strange since it's a cooperative game and you can just control multiple characters, which you do, but there are some additional rules there, but it plays basically the same. And then there's also a nightmare style mode where you can turn up the difficulty a little bit by drawing an extra tile if you happen to draw a Leatherface tile. So there's an additional dial of difficulty there. So let's talk a little bit about, this is, as we usually do this, we like to have our long form discussion, right? Which is useful a lot of times after you've played the game. So you can have somebody to talk about the game too. That's kind of our whole thing. So we're going to take our time and stuff. So first, as you say, we're going to do things a little bit differently. And in this case, we're going to talk about, want to talk a little bit about the idea, the genre, I guess, as a whole, because, I'm a huge horror fan. I got my Texas Chainsaw Massacre shirt on. It's it's in many people's opinion, one of the 10 best horror films ever made. Okay,
what do you think about the remakes?
Okay, let's not talk about the remakes.
We can't have a side discussion? I'm curious.
That's a little bit of a joke because, I'm not one to watch the remakes in general, and there's been a lot of them, and a lot of them are not very good. Okay, so I'll say that. But it is, the original is incredible. The second one is really good, but it's a very different film than the first one. So if you had seen Texas Chainsaw in the theater as when it came out, I was not born yet. And then you went to see the second one, it would be very jarring. However, that movie is amazing. It's just a completely, I think you kind of have to know that going in, or it's one of those things where you have to watch it, get used to the fact that it's very different in tone, and then maybe watch it again to really enjoy it, because there's some incredible stuff in the second movie. So I think the first 2 are really incredibly good.
Scary. This is up at my threshold of too much fear and scary.
So horror games, it's interesting because we talk about you see a movie, we're talking about movies now, but it's like movies come out and it's like there's a whole bunch of disaster movies in a row, and there's a whole bunch of Mission to Mars movies. Hollywood kind of gets in that thing, and it's interesting because horror as a genre is historically untapped in the board gaming space. Have you
well, not just untapped, but horror was like the stepchild of movies for many years, and it's hit mainstream now. It feels
well.
now we're kind of seeing a reversal of this. Number one, there's actually two
Yes, you're right.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre games out right now. They came out within a couple months of each other or something, right? I mean, this is a pretty brand. I pre-ordered this game. It's brand new, basically, right? And so this game, and then Final Girl's come out recently.
Yeah, Final
and that's
Girl is the really popular
It's a
one.
solo only game. I mean, you can play multiplayer. I think that's crazy, but
Super popular.
yeah, that's been very, very popular, and that's got installments and things. And a few years ago, that was like a Crystal Lake type game, was a riff on.
Friday there was one.
And now Prospero Hall has been putting out a bunch of these horror style games, which is a great segue into the fact that this designer Scott Rogers, who doesn't exist just in a vacuum, he's actually done. I know he's done biography of a board game. He's designed a number of other games. He was on the Dice Tower for a while as a segment, as a contributor, and then I think his stuff went over to the Ludology webpage, podcast feed. So he's kind of been in the sphere for a while. So he's no stranger to that, to being in the board gaming sphere. And then we did cover Fate of the Nostromo.
We reviewed Fate of the Nostromo,
which is another kind of interesting thing, that games are really starting to become, like there's an Escape from New York game coming out. There's there was a Warriors game. There's the 80s, 70s, 80s
yes.
are really getting a large amount of games that are really branded on those.
In addition to that, the other big trend that you haven't mentioned yet, but I'm sure you would get to, is the fact that there's been a sea change in the quality of the IP games. It used to be that a board game company would license an IP and just slap the worst game on it, and now we're starting to see these IPs being used for good, polished board games. This isn't one of them, but
yeah. So this comes out from Trick or Treat Studios, and they're actually very well known in the horror community for producing some incredible masks and things. I mean, they're a fairly recent company, within the last 10 or 15 years. I think they really kind of started getting more and more popular, and for good reason. They make a really lot of great stuff. And they actually have this game coming out, and I just actually pre-ordered this and Halloween. And the Halloween game is a one versus many game, and I've not been able to play it yet. I don't have a group to really play it with. So I haven't played it yet, but it looks absolutely incredible. And it's a kind of a twist on it's the designer of, there goes your computer.
yeah.
It's the designer of Spectre Ops, and it's that same system now taken and done. And it seems like, just reading through, I was like, oh my God, this looks amazing, and I can't wait to play it. So it's interesting to see, and they've got Eric Lang designing games for them now. They've got Reiner Knizia designs. I mean, it's interesting to see. I know the guy that owns the company. I've spoken with him. I've run into him at some horror conventions, and he's a pretty major gamer. It's interesting because, I work in the horror industry, and he does as well, and we're both pretty big board gamers, which is kind of an interesting thing. So it's just interesting to see some of these companies, like we talked about Scorpion Mask recently.
Yeah, Sky Team people.
Yeah, when we did this, so this is kind of just a funny aside, but we reviewed Sky Team, and I wrote on my notes Scorpion Mask, thinking, oh, I'll have to bring this up, and because I was like, this is so weird, because they have this smash hit kind of almost right out of the gate, and then I wrote it in my notes, and then when we were just reviewing the notes before we were going to do the review, I was like, what does that mean? And I typed it in to Google. I couldn't figure out what it meant. Neither of us could, and then it wasn't until afterwards that I was like, oh my God, that was the name of the publisher. So a lot of these small publishers kind of coming out of the gates with these big releases.
Yeah, and it always is nice to see new companies trying to experiment, but maybe where do we start here?
So let's talk about. Well, I don't want to talk too much because I feel like we've kind of. But let's talk about the art and components a little bit. First of all, that's the box cover looks. It's back here. It looks incredible. The art is incredible. All the art on the standees, it looks great to me. It's clearly art, but it's so spot on to the characters and stuff. It looks exactly like the movie likenesses on all the characters, which is great. So even these little eyeball tokens and stuff, that's such a visceral moment in the film. So I really like seeing that. Overall, all the art is fantastic. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't care so much about that kind of stuff, but I definitely care about sort of legibility, readability of the board. And it is very clear where you can move from where. All of the player aids, it would be nice to have another player aid for each character explaining the sequence of play. but there is a nice summary of how the tokens work, and everything is very readable. We were wondering like what was the thing about the 3 people die in the
It's
game.
right
There
there.
are symbols for those, so I do appreciate all of that.
Yeah. The theme, I mean, it's hard to look at this game and think like somebody just made this game like on a whim. This is an absolute and in total love letter in terms of the components. Okay, sorry, kind of getting the theme. Like, look at, like, first of all, you get this bag. This is the draw bag, which is the central mechanism of the game. And it's like, that's the whole point, right? Leatherface. I mean, this is incredible. It's human skin all stitched together, and it has a feel to it. Like, I mean, to me, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You get this little tray, which is like the kind of thing you'd get the chili and fries or what, you get that. And this is what you use. And it actually not only like, it has a game function. It helps for you to separate the tokens.
Yeah, it
and then
does have a
these
function.
get thrown in, and
It is
keeps,
a function.
it
You pass
really-
that between the current player.
But it's just so great. I mean, that is such an unnecessary
Yeah.
component, and
yeah.
it's so. I love this piece. It's so fantastic to me.
Yeah.
And then
components, but rulebook not so great. I mean, the layout is okay, but there were a lot of little
There's some,
weird rules that were unspecified. Board Game Geek has big thread of people asking for rules clarifications, and it's not so much that it was laid out wrong or without examples, but there were a lot of things that weren't covered in the rules that needed to be covered, including a bunch of very unintuitive situations that it seemed like something's wrong here.
Yeah. Going on to some other like things that are superfluous but really fantastic. You get this deck of cards, and I won't reveal what they are, but essentially, like when you get eliminated, you are dead. You draw one of these cards and you read what happens. Doesn't make any difference to gameplay at all. But it's just, I mean, after you play the game a few times and you would see these cards, it doesn't matter anymore, right? You've already seen them at whatever. But it's pretty amazing that this exists, just because it's like, what happened to your character? This is what happens to your character. And for a game that's like dripping with theme, I think that's a really cool, unnecessary part of the game. I really just think it's kind of a neat thing, and it really helps to bring you into that theme a lot more.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because I think that gives us a little window into the designer's mindset of being like, they're more about the experience perhaps than having a nice tight strategic game.
Yeah, even like, I mean, in terms of the movie, I mean, like, it's just like on the board, you get these brambles. I mean, that's great. And you get injured when you're in the brambles. There's the abandoned cars. It's like every moment in the movie you're going to find in this. So like, to me, like, I'm a huge fan of like the old watch a movie, play the game type thing. And like, this is the movie in a board game. And I think we talked recently about, what game that was like, it was like Stranger Things, which is like kind of like, there's always this meter of how much do you go abstract things so you have a workable game, and how much you go towards the theme so that you really can capture that level of the movie. And like I say, everything about this setup, each of the characters have their special rule. Like Grandpa comes out in the dining room, he's hitting you with the hammer and he's doing damage to you. All that stuff is like really amazing to me. I really think it's a really exciting part. And then the search deck is full of that kind of stuff too.
Thematic stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, that's, I mean, again, and even stuff like the bone tokens. I mean, this is a complete, they make tons of stuff out of bones. I mean, that's like a huge part of the thing, right? Everything about the theme and everything about all that stuff, love it. I mean, you cannot stuff any more theme into this game, I think.
So let's start our discussion of mechanics and gameplay, whereas the problems start here. But the way I want to lead us into that is to tell the story of our playthrough of this game. A very strange thing happened. It wasn't an unpleasant experience, but we took our first turn, and the rules were a little shaky. We took our first turn, and a very strange thing happened, which is we realized, first of all, the first turn is like, oh, I don't get to take any actions because the tokens don't come out to give you actions. And then like by the third turn, we were like, shall I draw more? No. And basically we weren't taking actions. For almost the first half of the game, you get 2 free movements, and then we were just like, no, the whole game is push your luck, and it was clear you should not push your luck. And after turn 3, we were laughing every turn because it was so absurd what we were doing. Yeah. Our playthrough was so absurd, and it was just all us laughing about how, like, this card is either going to be super easy or it's going to be impossible to win, and we'll just suicide.
Let
It
me
was a
so-
very weird
yeah.
experience.
So in our playthrough, we only played this once. I'm going to tell you that right now. I know most reviewers shouldn't say that, and we don't normally do. We like to have a good understanding of the game. But as we go through, we'll talk about why that's the case. But I just want to interject that, like, psychologically, so the system of like push-pull, right? Of like you get more actions, you want to push your luck for more actions, but you have to do so at a cost, is a great idea, But I think oftentimes in games, like, it's like, hey, you get an action, and if you want to get more actions, maybe then. But in this particular game, I mean, it's more likely in the early game that you won't get any actions, and it's kind of psychologically not. I mean, and again, if that's the theme you're looking for, is a punishing theme, okay. But like, if you're playing a game, you kind of want to get a chance to play the game. And I think you could go through several turns, and in fact, I think the first turn I was like, oh, I don't get an action. Okay, I guess it's your turn. And I think by the end, not to jump ahead, but by the end of the game, we were getting like, you could get 3 or 4 or 5 actions, and you just like, I don't need to take them. There's
It was
nothing
so
to do.
bizarre. In the very beginning, we were like, maybe you should tell the designer that in a fun game, you might want to let the player take some actions because there were no actions. But then very quickly, it completely flipped on its head, and we didn't care about any actions. Like, the whole point of the game was to discover these things. We just moved around. We didn't care about actions. And then at the very end of the game, it was like, I'm just going to sit and wait on the van for the other player to finish playing the game. It was so bizarre. And like the whole point of a push your luck is you have to force the players to push their luck. A push your luck has to be that you can't win unless you take calculated risks. And the whole strategy of winning this game is don't take any risks. There's no stress. There's no penalty. And we've seen on Board Game Geek, like, we reread the rules and we checked, and this is a well-known complaint and problem here.
Yeah, I think the core mechanism of the game revolves around pushing your luck in this bag. But we discovered within the first 3 turns that it's much more efficient because you get to take 2 free moves at the beginning of your turn, and then you start drawing tokens. It's incredible. It's like way better to just use your free actions. You always have to draw a token, or Leatherface moves towards you. So you draw a token. If it's an action, cool, I'll move again. Or you just lose your action. You don't care because there's nothing to do with your actions. The actions include pushing, which is not usually as useful. If you're standing next to somebody, you can push. If you're standing next to an enemy, but the enemies take a while to come out, especially if you're not drawing these tokens. And the other ones are pick up something, which mostly there won't be something to pick up unless you've revealed it with an eye. So that's almost always not useful. And then the other one is to search, which we'll get into. I'm not going to jump into that just yet.
But
okay, so, you can go ahead.
Essentially, 99% of the time playing this game, you're just moving. And you just want to move as fast as possible around everything, but there's no clock, and you get the free movements. There's no decisions you're making. The actions here, move, push, search, pick up, we did that once or twice. It was so, you're just moving around this board. And the very beginning of the game, the first 2 turns, we were in danger. After turn 2, we were spaced enough far away, nothing mattered. There was never any threat. There was never any tension. The only tension was we could occasionally draw a card that would make it impossible for that character to win. And then we'd have to just suicide that character.
So
which we were laughing. I mean, we were laughing constantly through the playthrough, but it wasn't it was because it was such an absurd experience.
So, as a big picture, like, if somebody brought me this game, and we really love talking about game design, and we love reflecting on that and how things are changed and how things, it's very exciting to talk about. So if somebody came up to me, if you were like Kudo Plays or one of these board gaming competitions, and somebody came up to me and said, here's my game so far, this is what I got. Or if I was a designer or publisher or whatever, I would say, you've got a lot of really cool concepts here.
There are some fun concepts.
A lot of neat stuff, right? But there's a lot of problems. So we're going to give it to the playtesters, and they're going to play it a bunch, and we're going to identify how to fix the problems in the game.
This is like the scene where when the producer or director says, it's not there yet. You don't have it yet.
Absolutely, yeah. So, can I talk about the search tokens now?
Sure.
So one of the things that you do in the game is to, at these named spaces, you can search. And one of the characters has a special action where he can search for 2 cards and then pick one and not pick the other. So, but it's, like actions are at a premium early in the game and then later, whatever. But that's one of the few things you can do. But you really don't want to do it because most of the things in the search deck are bad. Like there really is no reason to do it.
It's not just that they're mostly bad. It's just no reason. Why would you do it? You just move around till you find the key in the gas and then you go home.
There's a number of bad things in the deck. Almost all bad things, by the way. It's almost entirely bad things. So you get these hard-earned actions you push your luck for, and you're going to throw them away on the search deck. Now, I could see the first play or two, you're like, wow, this bad things keep happening to us, but let's keep searching. And maybe that's part of a theme, but you're pretty quickly, if you play this game, you're going to realize there's no reason to draw a search card.
Very bizarre.
It's like saying
bizarre.
hey, in Pandemic you get 4 actions. You can treat a disease, you can removing a cube from the board, or you can add cubes to the board for actions. That's the opposite thing you want to do. It really is kind of. I'm not being like.
It's weird though that there isn't something that would force you to do it.
Yes,
it's very strange here. And
so do you want to talk about the sub standard?
Well, I want to. There's a couple things I want to point out. This almost feels like our problems with this game are at so severe a level that it almost doesn't pay to nitpick about things. We do often talk about player powers and how they're fun and how are they so interesting that you would play it differently if you pick different ones? That is not the case here. Once you play this game, you know how it feels. Picking a different character is going to make very little difference.
Yeah, even when we're selecting the characters, I'm kind of like, that power does. I mean, I can already tell as a seasoned gamer that's not a great power. But not even that. It's not a great power, but it's not that interesting a power. And I didn't feel like the variation on the characters was really worthwhile.
Okay, I want to talk about the concept of a broken game because we've basically described this as a broken game, but it's not uncommon among board gamers, experienced board gamers, to hear people talk about a game being broken, and what they usually mean is someone has found a strategy. Typically some very esoteric strategy, do a certain combination of things and you win the game. And when people talk to me about that, like, oh, the game is broken, I don't want to play it. If they mean it in that sense, I don't care about that. Like, first of all, you've discovered, it's like a puzzle. You've figured out some way to do great on it. That's cool, that's fun. If you're in your group or your family and you've done that, that can be fun. And those typically tend to be very easy to fix. You say, okay, you don't take that character anymore, that character that let you break the game. Or let's not try the strategy where you use all the gears. And when we play Orleans and we beat it, we say, we're just going to take this building out and we'll have the fun of trying to solve this new puzzle. That is not what's happening here. In order to unbreak this game, you'd have to say every turn, I'm going to deliberately do something that's clearly wrong, that's clearly bad, and force myself to do something, not by taking a different strategy, but just by forcing myself to, it's like saying I'm going to play blackjack, and when I hit 20, I'm still going to hit. And maybe I'll get an ace and win. It's not fun.
Yeah, I think it's weird. It's kind of a weird thing because like the joy in playing the game is to play the game, right? It's like, oh, what decision should we make right now? And it's like saying, we could do this and then this and then this. Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. But it's like saying that and then saying, okay, what's the, by playing like to the strategy to win, that's what you're doing. That's the whole point of like playing a game, really, right? It's like doing your best and taking the strategies to try to win. And if you think like, oh, well, then just draw tokens anyway, well, where does it stop? Like, right? You're like, oh, let's always draw tokens until we, and it's like then you're just saying, let me make the worst choice I can.
Yeah, that's not a fix.
Yeah.
That's not a fix.
Yeah. It's not just like, as you say, throwing out the worst character or the best character and saying, okay, we're not going to use the medic. We're not going to use the iron strategy in this game, right? You're
deliberately making a bad move
yes,
to reduce your chances of winning. Now, I should say that, we've got in Board Game World, we have the luxury of having this wonderful site, Board Game Geek, where people do post variants and house rules. And I'm completely open to the idea that someone could come up with some rule changes, whether it's the publisher or some fans, some house rules that do make it do force you to push your luck or draw from the search deck. I do think this could be fixed.
Okay, so
you're not as friendly to the idea of allowing
I kind of
house
feel like
rules.
if I open a game up, if it's not, I don't want to there's so many games to play. I'm
Sure,
just going to play a different game,
sure,
you know,
sure.
like, and that's kind of where I tend to fall. There are some, like, you know, you say we don't want to kind of like nitpick like about certain things, but like there's some really interesting like things where I'm just like, okay, so for instance, like, and this is kind of about like the fundamental problems or whatever, like if you're standing on the van, you cannot win if the hitchhiker's on the van with you, right? You can't win. But like you could, I mean, we get in a situation where we're both standing on the van. You can take as much damage as humanly, you can take 1 million damage, doesn't really matter. As soon as Leatherface gets you and you're like at 3 or more health, he kills you and you go on this meat hook, which by the way is amazing. Because like one of the greatest scenes in the movie, like very, very well-known famous scene is when he grabs you and drags you in the house and puts you on the meat hook. It's amazing. And the fact that these 3 meat hooks are on the board, I absolutely love that. And that's how you lose the game, right? But Leatherface can't cross the highway. So the hitchhiker can be here with you and you can be on the van. Everybody can be standing on the van. Like, so we got into a situation where we took a lot of these objectives, which you haven't even really talked about yet.
We made the game. We played it as hard as we basically could make it.
You don't have to take the objective tokens or things, and those are making the game harder. We took 6 out of the 10, right, that you can take. So I think we got pretty... And we're standing there and we're just trying to get the tokens drawn from the bag to complete one of our objectives. And we're standing here and Leatherface can't cross the road. So there's no way we can ever die. And we're just standing here churning through these tokens, waiting to draw the right thing. And even if Hitchhiker comes out and he could hit you, it doesn't really matter because you can't be killed until Leatherface can't cross the road. And I think that, I know it took a little bit of extra time to talk about that, but like that's kind of the point. It's like if we played this game just now, and I would say, okay, cool, and this is about the playtesting thing, like I'd say, okay, there has to be some way that he can kill you or something because this is a broken scenario that can develop. And I don't know how many other things there are like
that. There are a bunch of things like that. I think you're right. This is sort of like the thing you would tell the designer, and normally that means you go back and work on it, but for some reason, whatever the case may be, they're like, that's not important. Don't worry about it. just put it in the game. And if you're making a game that's just about the experience of it, then maybe you don't care about some of those things. But this leads me to the thing I want to talk about that I think is related to that, which is, who is this for? Because some of these things we point out can be forgiven if the game is really about the experience for new players and it's very simple and the rules are super easy to learn and play, and it's just about the thematics and the experience. But there's a problem here, right? Which is that there's too many weird, unintuitive, fiddly rules here about the tokens, especially when you draw, when they trigger, that it's very hard to recommend this to new gamers.
I mean, we played thousands of games and here we are, we're reading the rule book and we're like, let me go back over that part again. And we kind of kept consulting before we kind of got started. We did go through a couple times because, you know, there's some rules in the game that are not, that we haven't seen before. Like there's a bit of a, you know, sometimes you do this, sometimes you do that. And, you know, this thing really helps to sort the tokens and stuff like that. But the point is that we had to look a couple times, and I feel like a gamer that's just like, hey, I love Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm gonna try this game because I love that, and I'm not normally a gamer. They're gonna sink immediately.
They're gonna sink. They're probably gonna get a lot of rules wrong, but maybe they'll make a better game. Like maybe they'll get the rules wrong and they'll have
a better time.
Have a more interesting
Maybe that's
game.
the case. Maybe a non-gamer comes up to this and they play the strategy that they think they should play. They draw a lot of tokens to try to, and then they get just massacred.
Yeah,
they get
is
chainsaw
interesting.
massacred.
Now, one of the things I also wanted to mention is an odd similarity between this and the other game by this designer, Fate of the Nostromo, Alien Fate of the Nostromo, and both of them. When we played and reviewed Fate of the Nostromo, we talked about how odd it was to have a cooperative game where there wasn't a clock and the lack of tension that resulted. And we had the exact same experience here. And it may be a design philosophy with the designer, may have a different vision of how a cooperative game works, but it is odd that both those games have that flavor of like, it feels like something should be pushing you to have to optimize more and increase some tension, and it's not here.
So I do want to disagree with you a little bit.
Okay.
First of all, like we did really enjoy parts of Alien Nostromo. I did anyway. I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff in there.
Well, another high thematic game with
very
some thematic flavor to
And I
it.
think the one real failing of the game that there wasn't a clock in that game. Like there was no in a normal cooperative game, as you say, like the enemy deck or the enemy
Something
gets
ramps it
stronger.
up and pushes you.
And because of that, it's becoming more and more tense. And that game more was like, if the alien gets you, he's gonna kill you type of thing. And so you had to be constantly nervous about that happening. Now this game does have a bit of a clock, more of a clock, in a way that a couple things. Leatherface's track will increase, meaning he'll move faster.
You're right. That's
He'll
true.
find you faster. He'll do more damage, and killing you is what precedes the game along. That's number one.
Except
Yeah.
in a normal cooperative game with a clock, that would be happening every turn.
Right,
He would
yeah.
get strength. But here you just you cancel the clock by only drawing one token at a time. You essentially cancel that clock.
Well, that's the big flaw, right? But at the same time, there are other, like Grandpa, Cook, and Hitchhiker come out, but they slowly come out.
Not only that, but they come out and they like sit on their space. They're of no threat.
Well, if you were moving around, I mean, that's the thing. Like, if you were drawing some of the search cards and things will send you to their locations, which is just another reason you would never want
and
to
an
do that.
instant death.
Right. And so like that's kind of like, and but they do. I mean, they like if you're in the house, you don't want to go in the space with Grandpa. I mean, it's kind of neat that we didn't talk about this truck, but I like that this truck is always going along the road. It's really kind of a cool thing. And you could push the characters in front.
You could, but you don't, because there's no point.
There's no reason to. I mean, other than the hitcher, you'd have to push him out of the van, right?
yeah.
Which is cool because you push him out of the van in the movie. But anyway, so I like that. Like that is a clock of sorts.
It's a clock that doesn't tick unless you want it to tick because you get bored.
Well, yeah.
It was when we did our playthrough. Every turn we were just drawing one, but then there was a constant feeling like, when are we gonna throw this switch and just send this car right off the rail on purpose?
Yeah, I think when we got to so these objective tokens are kind of are cool because you have to. It forces, like that's the interesting part, right? It forces you to be non-efficient. It's saying meet at the dry lake, meet at the abandoned cars. It's forcing you to do things that you wouldn't normally do, and that's an objective based game, which is in a lot of games, which makes sense. And so we did that. It helped to guide our actions, give us those little mini
give
goals,
us something
which
to
is good.
do.
I like that part, right? But there are some like one of the things is like I guess is a little bit of a spoiler, but like it's you have to draw one of each of these tokens, and so you're like, okay, like. And we were just sitting on this van.
We had won the game. We were just waiting for you to do that. We were in
just
no threat.
drawing,
and it could have taken us 20 turns to get there. And the other player has nothing to do but wait.
It could have literally taken days. I could have sat here. We would never have died.
Never have died. That's right. And under no threat.
I would just keep drawing them until we happened to get the correct configuration.
Yeah,
Which is a bit of, that's like, and I mean, I think we've highlighted a few of these like almost niche, because you don't have to draw that objective, but there's just in that
They're
limited play that
also
we
felt
have.
like very random. Like, look, half of them are just meet into some place. Very easy to do. You're moving around. And then the other half were your one that required you to draw 4 of these things, which is just sort of a boring thing, random. The other card is I had one that was like, you have to have exact 1 wound or less. And what that meant is if you got unlucky, that character you were never going to win the game.
Yeah.
You were just going to suicide that person. And the game rules are like, if you can get both people survive, that's a great victory.
Yeah.
Otherwise, when one dies, get a new character.
Yeah.
It's also got that soft win, which is like, what if you played Pandemic? You're like, if you get too many epidemics, you don't really lose the game. Keep playing, you get a -1 score. That's not as fun.
I will mention also there's the Leatherface gets a rage token, and that helps to speed the game up too. It's like Horrified has the enraged monster, or whatever, which I like thematically too because he gets the best part is he gets mad and he's like, oh, and he's like swinging his chainsaw
that's
around, and
scary,
you just
screaming
really
and stuff.
feel that like frustration and anger that he has. Just one more little rules thing is like if you can't drop things out of
So
your
weird.
inventory. So like if you walk into the gas and you're like, oh, I have to pick, you're compelled to pick up the gas, and you have both gas cans, which I did, and then you find the keys, you can't pick the keys up.
This is one of these things
there's
that
no way to ever
feels like that's
there's
got to be an
never-
errata. Like the rules are not clear on this. You can't drop it.
Very clear. We read the rule.
I know,
on
but this has got to be
it's-
errata.
and it
This game
says-
needs an errata. That's the bizarre thing. Like you're walking with your 2 gas cans, you find the keys to the car, and you're like, no, I'm not going to do it. And then
says you have to place it.
Yeah.
You place it on your character map. If another one, you place it on the You can't. You
There's
cannot
lots
get.
of-
You cannot.
You cannot get rid of the gas, and you have no use for it. Like you can't use. I was thinking, like, shouldn't you be able to like use that gas to do something? Like,
don't wanna be
have a
repetitious,
weapon. You
but-
can't pick up any weapons. You can't use the gas.
Yeah, I gotta reiterate something you said before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say 3/4 into the game, like half of the game to the end of the game, whatever. We're drawing these actions, which you would push your luck to get, and there's nothing to do with them.
Nothing to do with our
and
actions.
You can't even say, I'm going to take 4 of my actions, which I don't even need.
There's nothing to do.
To just drop the gas. Like, just drop it. I drop one of the things.
Crazy.
It really is pretty shocking.
Really inexplicable. I'd love to hear the story of what happened here. You had a story about Renee Zellweger.
Oh no, you were saying like about you had asked about like one of the movies that she was in. So
Yeah,
Renee
she was in one of them, right?
Yeah, Renee Zellweger was in Matthew McConaughey, who were pretty big names in.
But it must not have been at the time of this,
They were in
right?
the next generation Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, and they had like there was a they're on the cup. When you do like a T-shirt or something, you have a license, right? Oftentimes you say, "Hey, here's the T-shirt I want to do," or here's the cover of the DVD. We're going to re-release this Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4. They send it to the actors, anybody that's on the cover or whatever. You're going to send, and
They get to sign off.
and the company's going to say, "Okay, we don't like this. Change this. Whatever." And the actors and actresses can reject the design or whatever, right? Okay. And that's one of the lengthy parts about licensing.
Renee Zellweger just said it.
so-
Auto reject. Whatever comes
Both
to
of them were like,
it'll never be allowed
and the
on
cover
the
looked
cover.
kind of cool, and they were like,
no, we don't want to be on the
They
cover.
got to be taken right off the cover. They didn't want to have any association with it.
They can do that?
So
They
can you
can
imagine?
veto all
They
the
can-
covers?
They can just say no. And so like
Interesting.
the company was like, "Here's this great piece of art," and they were like, "Okay, quickly do a little erase.
Put me on it.
Here we go."
Yeah.
And they didn't want to be associated with it, which is kind of interesting. You think like, did they just feel like that was terrible? They want to disown it or whatever, or they just feel like I don't want to be associated with it anymore. It kind of
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's
Like,
interesting.
pretty kind of interesting, but yeah.
Any final thoughts? I mean, I do have a little final thoughts. I mean, I probably give this a like.
Oh, I didn't even think about my rating. I don't even want to grade it.
We're not gonna rate it.
I'm gonna plead the fifth.
I
on
mean,
rating it.
this is about as. I can't recommend this to anyone, but I will say this. I mean, maybe I'm going to give it a 2. I'm going to give it a number. Like, it's
I'm
pretty
not-
bad.
I'm not
However, I do want to say this. We have played games that we really actively did not. We're angry that we had to play it. I'm not going to mention them. We'll get to reviewing them eventually. But basically, we haven't finished them because it's really unpleasant.
Yeah.
Unpleasant to play the game. You're just forcing yourself to finish.
Yeah.
Which might happen to us if we tried playing this again. But for our first playthrough, it was such an absurd, surrealistic experience where we were like, what's happening? It's my turn. I don't want to go. I have nothing to do. We kept waiting for the other one to like break everything and be like, I'm going to draw a million tokens just to make bad things happen. We were so enraptured by the chaos and the confusion. Like, how is this happening?
It was kind of like, okay, like...
Check the rules again.
Like,
can this possibly be right?
I'm Mario and you're Luigi or whatever, and we're like walking along and you see like the dungeon and the fireballs and the spinning spikes and everything, and I'm like, what if we just went in the store here? And it was kind of like we were just like walking along, like we're on the top of the board, right? Walking along, and we're just like looking down, like, oh, there's all the spices. And like, should we be doing this? Are we allowed to do this? And like we just kept walking and walking along the top, and we're just like kind of start laughing, right? Because like we're like, why is this so?
Or what if you're in a movie like Saw, and he's like, you can either cut off your hand or cut off your mouth, and you're like, let's just walk slowly, very slowly, right down the middle.
Take A, B, or C. A is you cut off your leg. B is you cut off your other leg.
C is you just walk slowly.
What's C? Oh, well, you get a slice of this cake.
You just walk slowly to the end of the door and open
and
it.
then that's it. It was really, it was weird. It was very
It was
strange.
tempting to blow up the train too,
was,
right? It was tempting to be like, let's
like,
just draw 100 tokens.
Yeah, just.
But we couldn't.
You can't even draw it.
We couldn't do it to
Yeah,
ourselves.
but these tokens, I really like. There's like the fact that like you keep drawing the family token and it brings the family out, and you're like, oh, that's and just the photos. Like, I love the photos. The photo token is so great too. Like, because he's got the photos. It's just such a cool. Like, I just look at these pieces. I'm like looking at them as you're saying this, and I'm like, that's so neat. That's so neat.
It's a neat idea. But then
really
they don't
is
do anything when
wrapped
they come
around-
out either.
Oh,
so
what
in
a
addition to
bummer.
not doing anything, There was some thematic things that seemed
Yeah.
interesting, like the doors could cut you when you go in, but we're like, we just won't go in the house. There's no point.
We recently played and reviewed Stranger Things, and we really had a big long discussion about, like, and I said this earlier, that barometer of like the theme,
Yeah.
matching the theme, and versus like getting into mechanisms, and you have to abstract certain things and divorce yourself from the theme somewhat. And man, they went all in on the theme, and I love that. Absolutely love it. But there is
They had to make a choice
They
to
gotta-
either make
yeah.
it easier and fun and filled with luck. You could have had a lot of luck in this game, and you could have forgiven it. But you can't have it where there's no interesting decisions and no push your luck, no reason to push your luck. That is a real failure.
such
here.
a shame too. I'm like looking at. As you're talking, I'm looking at. I'm like, I'm like, look. I look at the brambles. I look at the bone room and grandma in there, and I'm like, I want to play this, but
Well,
it's,
then go easy on the idea of house rules. People can come up with house rules to make it push your luck, and maybe you can have the fun.
That's some
for this
part
one.
of me that like it's like
You don't
hard.
like it.
I'm really
Yeah, you
bad,
don't like
bad
it.
at the variants. I'm really bad at the variants. Well, I think we probably covered it. Do you have
A
anything
fun
else?
discussion. I mean, I really enjoyed talking about it. That's
Yeah,
worth something.
yeah. And again, like I feel like we're pretty negative on the game, but
Oh,
not
it's a
not
it's a bad-
disrespectfully
it's a
so.
bad
Like
game.
I mean, like
Yeah.
a lot of effort went into this to play, and the theme is amazing. And I not to be disrespectful to anybody that was involved in making the game. It
Well,
just
as
was
we
like
said,
not-
it's very hard to make
Yeah.
a board game, and board games to go through many hands.
Yeah.
Publishers make changes, designers work on it to a certain point.
It is such a shame though, because like there was so many amazing things about this production and about the theme in here. I just really wish, I really wish it was a
No, they
stronger mechanisms.
can't all be tens.
Yeah, I think that's the case here.
Thank you for joining us. Check out
Oh,
Greg's board game channel. What's it called?
Watch it just Tabletop World. By the way, you don't need to. After you've watched all this, you don't need to see any that you've already gotten.
It's true. At this
you don't
point,
need it.
you've made the mistake.
Yeah.
You've watched the whole full thing. It's too late for you to watch the short one.
Yeah. Well, there we go.
We'll see you next time.
Forty-five.
That's it. You don't wave your hand anymore. You're too
Here
good
it
for
is.
that.
Here's the.